Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander. This book belongs to Harry Potter. Shared by Ron Weasley because his fell apart.
Why don't you buy a new one then?
Write on your own book, Hermione.
You bought all those dung bombs on Saturday. You could have bought a new book instead.
But dung bombs rule. About the author.
Myself, Newt Artemis Fido Scamander, was born on 1897. His interest in fabulous beasts was encouraged by his mother, who was an enthusiastic breeder of fancy hippogriffs. Upon graduation from the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Mr. Scamander joined the Ministry of Magic in the Department for the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures. After 2 years at the Office for House Elf Relocation, years he describes as tedious in the extreme, he was transferred to the Beast Division, where his prodigious knowledge of bizarre magical animals ensured his rapid promotion. Although almost solely responsible for the creation of the Werewolf Register in 1947, he states that he is proudest of the ban on experimental breeding, passed in 1965, which effectively prevented the creation of new and untamable monsters within Britain. Mr. Scamander's work with the Dragon Research and Restraint Bureau led to many research trips abroad, during which he collected information for his worldwide bestseller,
Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them,
now in its 52nd edition. Newt Scamander was awarded the Order of Merlin, 2nd class, in 1979, in recognition of his services to the study of magical beasts, magizoology. Now retired, he lives in Dorset with his wife, Palpatina, and their pet nasals, Hoppy, Millie, and Mola.
The Foreword by Albus Dumbledore. I was deeply honored when Newt Scamander asked me to write the foreword for this very special edition of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. Newt's masterpiece has been an approved textbook at the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry ever since its publication, and must take a substantial amount of credit for our students' consistently high results in the care of magical creatures examinations. Yet, it is not a book to be confined to the classroom. No wizarding household is complete without a copy of Fantastic Beasts, well thumbed by the generations who have riffled its pages in search of the best way to rid the long of Horcrux, interpret the mournful cries of an augury, or cure their pet Puffskein of drinking out of the toilet. This edition, however, has a loftier purpose than the instruction of the wizarding community. For the first time in the history of the noble publishing house of Obscurus, one of its titles is to be made available to Muggles. The work of Comic Relief UK, which, funnily enough, has absolutely nothing to do with the American organization of the same name, in fighting some of the worst forms of human suffering, is well known in the Muggle world, so it is to my fellow wizards that I now address myself. Know then that we are not alone in recognizing the curative power of laughter, that Muggles are familiar with it too, and that they have harnessed this gift in the most imaginative way, using it to raise funds with which to help save and better lives. A brand of magic to which we all aspire. Comic Relief UK has raised over $250 million since 1985. That's also £174 million, or 34,872 galleons, 14 sickles, and 17 nuts. It is now the Wizarding World's privilege to help Comic Relief in their endeavor. You hold in your hands a duplicate of Harry Potter's own copy of Fantastic Beasts, complete with his and his friends' informative notes in the margins. Although Harry seemed a trifle reluctant to allow this book to be reprinted in its present form, our friends at Comic Relief feel that his small additions will add to the entertaining tone of the book. Mr. Newt Scamander, long since resigned to the relentless graffitiing of his own masterpiece, has also agreed. This edition of Fantastic Beasts will be sold at Flourish and Bots, as well as in Muggle bookshops. Everyone involved in getting this book to you, from the author, to the publisher, to the paper suppliers, printers, binders, and booksellers, contributed their time and energy in materials free or at a reduced cost, making it possible for 20% of the retail sales price less taxes from the sale of this book to go to a fund to set up in Harry Potter's name by Comic Relief UK and J.K. Rowling, etc., etc., Esquire. This fund was designed specifically to help children in need throughout the world. Wizards wishing to make additional donations to do so through Griggett's Wizarding Bank. As for Griphook, all that remains is for me to warn anyone who has read this far without purchasing the book that it carries a thief's curse. I would take this opportunity to reassure Muggle purchasers that the amusing creatures described hereafter are fictional and cannot hurt you. To wizards, I say merely, Draco, Dormir, Noqua, Titilandius, Albus Dumbledore. An introduction. About this book, read by the author, Newt Scamander.
Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them represents the fruits of many years' travel and research. I look back across the years to the 7-year-old wizard who spent hours in his bedroom dismembering Horcrux, and I envy him in the journeys to come, from the darkest jungle to the brightest desert, from mountain peak to marshy bog. That grubby Horcrux encrusted boy would track, as he grew up, the beast described in the following pages. I have visited lairs, burrows, and nests across 5 continents, observed the curious habits of magical beasts in 100 countries, witnessed their powers and gained their trust, and, on occasion, beaten them off with my travelling kettle. The first edition of Fantastic Beasts was commissioned back in 1918 by Mr. Augustus Worm of Oscurus Books, who was kind enough to ask me whether I would consider writing an authoritative compendium of magical creatures for his publishing house. Well, back then I was but a lonely Ministry of Magic employee and leapt at the chance both to augment my pitiful salary of 2 sickles a week and spend my holidays travelling the globe in search of a new magical species. The rest is publishing history. Fantastic Beasts is now in its 52nd edition. The introduction is intended to answer a few of the most frequently asked questions that have been arriving in my weekly postbag ever since this book was first published in 1927. The first of these is that most fundamental question of all. What is a beast?
What is a beast?
The definition of a beast has caused controversy for centuries. Though this might surprise some first-time students of magic zoology, the problem might come into clearer focus if we take a moment to consider the 3 types of magical creatures. Werewolves spend most of their time as humans, whether wizard or muggle. Once a month, however, they transform into a savage, 4-legged beast of murderous intent and no human conscience. The centaur's habits are not human-like. They live in the wild, refuse clothing, prefer to live apart from wizards and muggles alike, and yet have an intelligence equal to theirs. Trolls bear a humanoid appearance, walk upright, may be taught a few simple words, and yet are less intelligent than the dullest unicorn, and possess no magical powers in their own right except for their prodigious and unnatural strength. We now ask ourselves, which of these creatures is a being That is to say, a creature worthy of legal rights and a voice in the governance of the magical world, and which is a beast. Early attempts at deciding which magical creatures should be designated beasts were incredibly crude. Burdock Muldoon, chief of the Wizards' Council in the 14th century, decreed that any member of the magical community that walked on two legs would henceforth be granted the status of a being, and all others remain beasts. In a spirit of friendship, he summoned all beings to meet with the wizards at a summit to discuss new magical laws, and found to his intense dismay that he had miscalculated. The meeting hall was crammed with goblins, who had brought with them as many two-legged creatures as they could find. As Bathilda Bagshot tells us in A History of Magic,
little could be heard over the squawking of the dairy cows, the moaning of the auguries, and the relentless piercing song of the whoopers. As wizards and witches attempted to consult the papers before them, sundry pixies and fairies whirled around their heads, giggling and jabbering. A dozen or so trolls began to smash apart the chamber with their clubs, while hags glided about in the place of children to eat. The council chief stood up to open the meeting, slipped on a pile of porrock dung, and ran cursing from the hall.
As we see, the mere possession of two legs was no guarantee that a magical creature could or would take an interest in the affairs of the wizard government. Embittered, Burdock Muldoon swore any further attempts to ingratiate non-wizard members in the magical community into the Wizards' Council. Muldoon's successor, Madame Elfrida Clegg, attempted to redefine beings in the hope of creating closer ties with other magical creatures. Beings, she declared, were those who could speak in the human tongue. All those who could make themselves understood to council members were therefore invited to join the next meeting. Once again, however, there were problems. Trolls, who had been taught a few simple sentences by the goblins, proceeded to destroy the hall as before. Jarvies raced around the council's chair legs, tearing at as many ankles as they could reach. Meanwhile, a large delegation of ghosts, who had been barred under Muldoon's leadership on the grounds that they did not walk on two legs but in fact glided, attended but left in disgust at what they later termed the council's unashamed emphasis on the needs of the living as opposed to the wishes of the dead. The centaurs, who under Muldoon had been classified as beasts, and were now under Madame Clegg defined as beings, refused to attend the council in protest at the exclusion of the mer people, who were unable to converse in anything except for Mermish while above water. It was not until 1811 that definitions were found that most of the magical community found acceptable. Grogan Stump, the newly appointed Minister of Magic, decreed that a being was
any creature that has sufficient intelligence to understand the laws of the magical community and to bear part of the responsibility in shaping those laws.
Troll representatives were questioned in the absence of goblins and judged not to understand anything that was being said to them. They were therefore classified as beasts, despite their two-legged gait. Mer people were invited through the translators to become beings for the first time. Fairies, pixies, and gnomes, despite their humanoid appearance, were placed firmly in the beast category. Naturally, the matter has not rested there. We are all familiar with the extremists who campaign for the classification of muggles as beasts. We are all aware that the Centaurs has refused being status and requested to remain beasts. Werewolves, meanwhile, have been shunted between the beast and being divisions for many years. At the time of writing, there is an office for werewolf support services at the being division, whereas the werewolf registry and the werewolf capture unit fall under the beast division. Several highly intelligent creatures are classified as beasts because they are incapable of overcoming becoming their own brutal natures. Acromantulas and manticores are capable of intelligent speech, but will attempt to devour any human that goes near them. The Sphinx talks only in puzzles and riddles, and is violent when given the wrong answer. Therefore, there is a continued uncertainty about the classification of beast in the following pages. I have noted it in this entry for that creature. Let's now return to the one question that witches and wizards ask more than any other when the conversation turns to magizoology. Why don't muggles notice these creatures? How much longer is this freaking introduction? That's it.
We sincerely hope you enjoyed this preview performance of Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and like you, we look forward to the release of this magical film.